You're listening to the Play Therapy Podcast with Dr. Brenna Hicks, your source for centered and focused play therapy coaching.
Hi, I'm Dr. Brenna Hicks, the Kid Counselor. This is the Play Therapy Podcast where you get a masterclass in child-centered play therapy and practical support and application for your work with children and their families. In today's episode, I am answering a question from Juliet in Georgia, and this is about the process of communicating with parents when we meet with them initially, as well as the subsequent 5-week parent consultations as well. So really helpful topic, a lot of questions about engaging with parents lately that are surfacing kind of all over the place. So this is going to be really helpful. Let me read parts of the email and then we'll dive in together. When initially meeting with parents, I try to give plenty of information about the CCPT process and what they can expect. I try meeting with parents every 4 to 6 sessions that I've had with the child, both to keep them updated on the therapy journey and to minimize parents giving me updates in front of their child before and after sessions. Yes, that's exactly one of the reasons why we do that. I've gone back to listen to so many of your episodes to help with this, but I'm still not feeling confident in how to explain the different stages and phases of CCPT to parents and what that might look like as their child progresses through therapy. I'd really appreciate any help on how you typically formulate these parent sessions, the information you share with them while adhering to confidentiality, and how you answer those tricky questions like, why is my child regressing? Can you work on making my child not be as angry, anxious, quiet, etc.? How do you know when my child is in the next phase or will be ready to terminate, despite having gone over CCPT with them already? All right, so a lot to pack in here, but we'll do our best. So yes, absolutely. One of the most important things that we do is when we meet with parents for the very first time, what we call at our center the initial parent consult. IPC is how we abbreviate that. So if I throw that out, you'll at least know what I mean. I forget that not everyone knows my abbreviations. So when we have that initial parent consult, one of the greatest objectives that we have is setting expectations, being really clear, being really communicative, all the while honoring the fact that it cannot be jargony, it cannot be high level, it cannot be clinical, it cannot be above their heads. And this is where we struggle. I think often we are communicating, we are explaining, we are setting expectations, but it's at way too high of a level for parents. And it's just going straight over their heads and they're nodding and smiling and listening, but it doesn't register. It doesn't click. And they really have no idea in the grand scheme of things what anything you said means. So the challenge is always getting out of the clinical, because so much of what we do is clinical in nature, and we tend to speak from that clinical perspective. We can't with parents. So we absolutely want to set expectations, be really clear, really communicative, help them understand the process, but it has to be in a way that they're going to receive. So that's my first thought. The second is we absolutely meet with them every 5 sessions. It is a separate meeting. We do not sacrifice the child's playtime for a parent consult. It is in addition to, not in place of. And we meet with them and we, yes, absolutely get updates from the parent so we know what's going on. And then we also share what's been going on from our side therapeutically. And it does prevent frequent communication and updates because they know every 5 sessions, I'm going to sit down for an hour and I'm going to be able to share anything that I need or want to. It becomes the communication channel and it prevents that constant email, message, lobby conversation that they feel compelled to have. You say, we can talk about that in our parent consultation. And then they save it all for that time. So that's very important as well. And so what do we need to do to feel confident to explain things to parents and what it's going to look like as they're going through therapy? So you mentioned, Juliet, stages and phases. I actually do not talk about the stages with parents. That's clinical in nature. That's actually for us. That is helpful for us to know what we can expect as far as the progression through the stages. But that's clinical. The phases are big picture journey. So we absolutely want to share the phases with parents because they need to know what to expect. They need to understand that the first 5 or so sessions are rapport building and trust and bond and relationship. They need to devote about 5 sessions to that in and of itself, which means they can't rush the pace. They can't expect you to meet with their kid for 50 minutes and have miraculous outcomes. The kid doesn't even know you. You're a stranger to them. It takes about 5 sessions before the trust and the rapport has been established. So they need to understand initiation phase. They absolutely need to be prepared for resistance. Because if we do not sufficiently prepare them for resistance, help them understand its value, help them understand that it's necessary, help them understand that it is the catalyst for moving into work. As soon as the child's behavior takes a turn for the worse, they bail because they didn't feel prepared for it. So you have to help them understand resistance is a phase and we're going to hit it. And here's what you can expect. And here's what it will look like. And this is normal and this is necessary. Then we're going to talk about work. This is when you're going to see subtle changes in the course of your child's behavior, emotions, and ways that they process things. Doesn't happen overnight, even in work phase, but you're going to help them understand we spend the bulk of our time therapeutically in work phase. And this is when over time you can retroactively look back and say, wow, that's really improved. I've seen a change there. That is definitely getting handled in more self-enhancing ways, et cetera, et cetera. And then termination phase, equally as important, because parents will get to the end. They're really pleased and satisfied with the results. And they're like, great, thank you so much. And they think that they're done. They need to understand the importance of the phase of termination. It's a countdown, it's a process, it's a closure, it's a weaning off. We don't ever want a kid to just never come back as soon as things get better. So we're also going to talk them through that process. So that's the importance of the phases. The stages are clinical. A parent does not want to hear that their kid is going to be aggressive. And we can't help them with that. We can't make sense of it for them. We can't tell them that it's valuable, it's needed. They hear that my kid's going to be regressive and aggressive, and they can't handle it. That's why parents don't come into playrooms, because they're not equipped to be neutral. They're not equipped to feel compelled to just let a child do what a child needs to do. So the stages we keep for ourselves, and we will track where the child is with phases, stages, and timeline. That gives us a more comprehensive picture of where we are in the journey, but the parent needs to know phases, not stages. Okay, and then how do we formulate the parent sessions? Well, generally speaking, parents get the chance to speak first. You want to hear from them. You want to hear what their concerns are, changes that they've noticed, positive or negative, updates, history, background, whatever you think is helpful. And that is at the initial parent consult as well as subsequent 5-week consults. Because the goal is that they get the floor, they get to share whatever's important to them. What's pressing for them, they're going to share it. Then you are going to share observations about what they've given you. You're going to weave together root issues. You're going to normalize and reassure. You're going to explain the why behind some of the behavior, provide objective perspective. You're going to provide a different perception to the behavior than what the parent likely has. So they talk, you provide thoughts and observations, then you transition into how CCPT either will address or is addressing those things. And then if you're in a 5-week consult, you're going to share what has happened over the last 5 sessions. And you're going to hit themes and big picture observations. So that's how you preserve confidentiality. You're not going to share details. You're not going to give specificity, but you're going to give big picture what's going on. The child's doing a lot of relational work. The child's playing out power and control every single week. The child is fear-facing, so the child's working on anxiety. The child is whatever. You're going to give big picture, symbolic play, thematic play, help a parent understand what is happening, not so much details, because A, we're preserving confidentiality, B, parents don't care about the details. They just want to know that progress is being made. So really the highlight of these PCs is that progress is being made. We're exactly where we want to be. We're seeing the exact things that we were hoping for emerging. Your child is working hard. Your child is doing the things that are going to address the concerns. That's what they need and want. They don't really want any details of what's happening in the play. And then as far as answering tricky questions, a lot of that will be naturally addressed with a very robust and in-depth initial parent consultation. Because my parents never ask me, why is my child regressing? Because they knew that was possible and they knew that that was likely from the beginning. If they do happen to ask that because they've forgotten, you go big picture in your explanation to these kinds of questions. So, is it normal that my kid is acting like a baby all of a sudden? Okay, that's actually a really easy question to answer big picture. Well, you have to keep in mind that as kids work through stuff, it makes them vulnerable. And vulnerability makes us want to feel like we need to be nurtured and cared for and protected and kept safe. And when did we feel the most of those qualities? When we were babies. So it's a natural tendency we have. That's why when we're in pain, we curl up in a fetal position. Why? Because it's comforting, because it reminds us of when we were at our safest, most loved, most cared for, most protected in utero and in infancy. That's a really easy, big picture answer. We don't need to give any specific details to that child's issues. Same thing with, can you work on making my kid not be such and such? If you explain the process and the expectations from the beginning, you won't get asked that question. If you do happen to get asked that question, you go really big picture. Well, you know that child-centered play therapy is not going to include me bringing anything up. But if the child is struggling with it, if the child is going to work on that, it will come up. So we just need to be patient, and it will inevitably make its way into the playroom. I don't need to bring it up. The child will bring it up, but it won't be through dialogue. Okay? And then how do you know when my child is in the next phase or will be ready to terminate? We don't necessarily need to know when the child is in the phase, but it's really clear. So the simple answer there is you can tell where the child is based on what's happening in the playroom. There's going to be a lot of relationship building to start. Then there's going to be resistance. And then they're going to start diving into work. And then we're going to move into termination. Those are very easy to see phases. As far as when we'll be ready to terminate, we have termination criteria. We've talked about that in earlier podcasts. So we're not just willy-nilly arbitrarily saying, oh, I think maybe we can wrap up. We need to make sure that the child meets criteria for termination. And this is why we're having parents commit to 5 at a time. They're not in it for the long haul. They're committing to 5 at a time. And so you're going to meet and say, I wonder how we feel about how things are going. And then we're going to see if the child meets the criteria to terminate. And if so, then we'll do our final 5. So if you reassure parents that there is a system, there is a process, there is a framework, when you get questions like that in sessions, we talk about this on coaching all the time. We actually talk about parent consults a lot in coaching as well, but we talk about this specific element of that all the time. When a parent asks you, well, how do you know? And what's going to happen? And why aren't you doing this? And when is this going to happen? And blah, blah, blah. They're not actually asking those questions. They think they are. But really what's going on is they're saying, please reassure me that this is the right fit for our family. Please help me feel that I can be hopeful, that this is going to get better. Please encourage me to believe that transformation is taking place. They're not actually asking the questions that they're asking you. They need to believe that this is going to work. That's really what they want. And so our goal in the parent consultations is they need to believe that they're going to have the more desirable after state that they're seeking. They don't want to stay where they are. That's all it boils down to. So if you can help them believe that they're getting away from where they are and they're going to end up with a more desirable after state, they will trust the process and they will trust you and they will trust their kid and they will trust the model, and you will be able to complete the entirety of treatment with that family. So Juliet, thank you so much for the question. That was really helpful. And I hope that that encourages all of you, because working with parents is part of the job. It's a package deal. When you choose to work with kids, you choose to work with their parents. And so we have to make sure that our relationship is built with them as well. And I didn't talk about that at all in this episode, but I've mentioned it before. Relationship with the parents is just as important as relationship with the clients. So do not neglect building relationship with your parents. That's a crucial factor in all of this as well. And you do that in your consults. All right. Love y'all. Reach out if you want to chat. Brenna@thekidcounselor.com. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Play Therapy Podcast with Dr. Brenna Hicks. For more episodes and resources, please go to www.playtherapypodcast.com.